Good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'll ask you to please silence your cell phones. I am Mandy Snook, Missoula Organization of REALTORS Board President. The Missoula Organization of REALTORS, along with the Housing Report Committee, are pleased to present the Five Valleys Housing Report. Our mission with this report is to provide the community with insights into Missoula's housing market. The report has evolved from what has been described as a 4-page typewritten flyer to the current web-based interactive data dashboards. I want to be frank with you all. These numbers are difficult to hear. Data is an essential piece of problem solving, and the data is clear. We need more housing. In an effort to provide a comprehensive view of our community, we have added a few new data elements and visualizations that will be discussed further in the presentation. These include information from the City of Missoula's new Homeless Management Information System, more detailed neighborhood maps, and an affordability map. These dashboards are divided into 4 major categories: sales, social, supply, and rental, with 38 visualizations to help provide a more complete picture of our community that can be used by community members, businesses, nonprofits, and policymakers as we serve Missoula's needs. I would like to introduce our committee members who will be presenting this morning. Jim McGrath with the Missoula Housing Authority, Paul Burrow with Professional Property Management, Brent Wahlberg, Windermere Real Estate, Paul Forstein, IMEG Group, and Carissa Trujillo with Homeward. Additional committee members include Lynn Stenerson with Stockman's Bank, Derek Sheehan, University of Montana Bureau of Business and Economic Research, Andrew Connor, graduate student in Business Analytics from the College of Business, Lauren Mosted, Windermere Real Estate, Jim Bichon, CEO of MOR, and Dwight Easton, the Public Affairs Director for MOR. At this time, I'll ask Jim McGrath to start this year's presentation.
Thank you. So the realtors finally figured out to get me on and off the stage as quick as possible and made me go first because I am the Ricky Henderson of the housing report. So all-time leader in leadoff home runs. So either I hit a home run or you walk me and I steal 2 bases. So, yeah. So we're, as you said, we're going to focus on some of the newer slides that we have. And I'll dive right into them. One of them right now is, that you can see, is from our HMIS, the Homeless Management Information System. So in the past, what we've reported in terms of homeless numbers was known as the point in time count, which is the annual census that we do every January. And that's a great number, and we still do that. But for a number of years now, we've been collecting data about people as they present in the community, homeless and at risk, and put them in this system. This is, by the way, a statewide system. So we do have data just like this for other communities and statewide, and I think we're working on maybe being able to do some comparisons. But this is, rather than being one time, this is pretty much close to real time. And so what you can see on this is, for example, March of 2022 is the final point there. We had 650 homeless people in our system. Now, the one thing you can look at, people are like, well, you're doing a survey in January, but aren't there more homeless people in the summer? Well, you can look. Well, you can, for example, you can compare to March of last year, we had 652. In July, the high point we had of 2021, we had 655. So maybe there's more people in the summer, maybe not. The low point, by the way, on this recently, September 2021, 592. So as you can see, the numbers are not really wildly fluctuating. We do on these charts break out. We can do this in the data system as well. Different categories, for example, the top one breaks out the number who are veterans. So you can see how many of those homeless people are veterans. 78. And the bottom one breaks out between people who have been homeless a long time and people who are chronically homeless. That's 97. The chronically homeless are really the hardest to serve. They are disabled, often with mental illness, substance abuse issues combined. They have a lot of impacts on our jails, our mental health system, so they are often a population that we try to serve. And we'll talk about that in a minute when we talk about Trinity. Next slide. So that's a really cool slide, and we'll see more. You can go into those ongoing throughout the year. This one is also from that system, and this is what I call an inflow or intake. So this is the number of new people per month. So the final one, which is March of this year, 59 people were new to the system. And that means that they became homeless, and we had no record of them being homeless before that. So it's a really interesting thing. It bounces around a lot because this is what happens on, sort of month by month. Now you notice in one of the spikes recently, January of 22, 77 new people. Well, January is when we do a point in time count. So that may be actually why we got more new people, because we're out surveying them and maybe added some people in. The lowest or the fewest new people in a month in recent history is March of 20th with 27. Now, those two spikes in 2019 and 2018 are when we brought online a couple of big providers of shelters, and so those people were not necessarily newly identified as homeless. They just had never been in the HMIS system before and got entered in all at once. So that's what that shows. So again, this gives you an interesting view of how we're doing in terms of who shows up newly homeless. By the way, you can do a parallel of that of people leaving the system, so it doesn't necessarily tell you exactly what happens. Next slide. Sorry about that. If you're not being able to hear me online, sorry about that. So these are one's an old one. The other one on the left is a new one, and it's unfortunate. But this is the slide for me that tells the entire story of 2021 in one slide. It's about the success rate of our voucher program. So the Section 8 vouchers, rental assistance vouchers, allow a working family, disabled, senior, whoever in our community to rent from a private market unit, and we help them pay. So they pay an affordable amount for them, 30% of their income, the housing authority pays the rest. There's several years wait time to get on that. There's only a set number of them that we have, but it's a great program. It's a very critical program to help people. The reason we've never had this slide before is because the success rate was pretty poor. It used to always be mid to high 70% rate. You got a voucher, 7 to 8 out of 10 leased up with that voucher before it expires. Suddenly, in 2020, that changed. And Paul will tell you about this in a minute, but you already know about it. Extremely low vacancy rate, very hard to find units at all, increasing rents. In fact, rents increasing above what we could pay as based on our federal rules. We saw the success rate drop to 68%, and then in 2021, as low as 57%. That means instead of 8 out of 10 people successfully being able to use that resource, it means 5 or 6 out of 10. That's a huge difference. And one of the drivers of that is that we're limited by what we can pay based on what's called fair market value, which is a census-based number, so it always lags. And the amount that we were allowed to pay for somebody drifted way below what market rents were. And that just meant that even if there was an available unit, that we couldn't help them in that unit. We did get two waivers from HUD, and only mentions one. We got a second one, which allowed us to push our rents up higher, and that's helped a lot. So now I'm seeing rents continue to push past that. This is an unbelievably serious turn of events. This is the first time this has ever happened, but to take that critical resource that helps our working families and other needy populations actually rent in Missoula, for that to not be able to work because of those market conditions is very serious. The second slide on this is the one we've had for a long time, which is waitlist numbers, and you can see the waitlist numbers went down. It was 1472 in 2021. The year before it was 1752. However, we do have a note on that. Part of that is probably related to the success rate I just talked about. Because if we have 10 vouchers, and we used to be able to give them, and 7 or 8 out of 10 were able to use them, now only 5 or 6. That means we have to bring more people off the waiting list and give them vouchers and hope that they can use them. So even though the same number of people may be applying, they may be coming off of the wait list faster because it's not being, they're not succeeding. So that number maybe goes down, but that doesn't mean that the need was served by that person thrown off that wait. Next slide. So there is one solution to this. And so this is all the horrible numbers, but now let's look at some that are a little bit better. But it won't even be on this slide. This is a slide about how many affordable units we produce in Missoula in a year, in any given year. And it varies a lot. But affordable, these are ones that are not only set aside for people at a lower income, but they're also, the rents are kept below market. And they are more or less permanently affordable. They're very important. And this is really when there are no units, we need these new units. They're very challenging to get. It's mostly federal resources, and it takes a long time to build them. And so we have not been able to build many of them over the year by year. Some years none, some years a few. So last year we built 36 came online. Skyview is a senior project. Of course, it's built up immediately. And you can see that over the course of a decade or so, we probably can produce about 200. Well, the good news, and we've been talking about this for several years, is that in starting at the end of next year and into the year after that, 23, we'll see 2 big projects come online. Trinity, which is 202 units, which is a partnership between the Housing Authority and Homeward, being developed with Blue Line. That'll be 200 some units. 130 of them will be affordable housing for working families and so on. And 30 of them will be permanent supportive housing for the homeless. And that will be targeting that little purple line you're seeing on that first graph. That's for chronically homeless. So we'll be able to serve that very important population and give some units to them. Then shortly thereafter, in the spring, we'll also see the Bellagio come online, 200 units for a project with the Housing Authority developing with a private partner, again with the Blue Lines helping us with that, another 200 units. So we'll see in 1 year, basically 2 decades worth of production of housing, and that will certainly make a difference, but it'll be a drop in the bucket. One thing that we don't have on this, we have not been tracking what we would call affordable homeownership, permanently affordable homeownership. There's some reasons why that we haven't been, but we are going to hopefully see 70 plus units of that land trust developed homeownership in the next year or so, depending on their timeline.
Okay. My name is Paul Burrow with Professional Property. I'm kind of tasked every year with compiling the data from some of the larger property management companies in Missoula. So what's interesting is, so this data set is about 36,000 data points throughout the year of different mixed units that are available in Missoula. And we're putting 6.1% more units this year than last year, but unfortunately that didn't help anything. We actually decreased our vacancy rates, and prices also went up. The slide that you see here is just kind of a what's good about our interactive slides now is you can go through, you can uncheck different boxes, and kind of customize the data to what, if you're interested in maybe building a 2-bedroom, you can kind of uncheck the rest and see what a 2-bedroom give you. This year is the first time I've seen a 2-bedroom apartment and standard multiplex go for more than $1,000 a year. So, and another change we've seen this year is usually 2 bedrooms were the most popular apartment. Now that's changed to 1 bedrooms. It's probably just the that's what people are building now to try to get more density in. So, probably go to the next slide. So this kind of a slow march to 0% vacancy rate. Last year, we ended the year about 1.3% vacancy. But if you look at fourth quarter of last year, it was at 0.6. So about less than 1% vacancy rate. And with things changing so fast and prices going up so fast, I like to look more at the year over year. You see that last year, first quarter, we were sitting at 1.2%, and this year we're at 0.9 already. So it's not shaping up to be any improvement this year at all. So it's just we have kind of some natural turnover in the summer, so you see a little bit of a spike there, but we're already below last year's numbers. We're going to be 0 by the fourth quarter of this year again. Probably go to the next slide. One thing that I can share with you is everybody wants to know how much rents have increased. So last year, rents were only up, I say only, but they're only up about a little over 5%. The problem with that is that with the summer turnover, the last half of the year really accelerated like a hockey stick. So when you look at quarter over quarter, we're up about 16% from this time last year to this year. So that's when summer comes around again, and that's probably going to continue, especially if the vacancy rate is still kind of declining down. With that being said.
All right, everyone, I'm just going to speak briefly about the Housing Price Index, and that is a broad measure of the movement of single-family home prices in the United States, and specifically we have some Montana data here. Generally speaking, it's a measure in the change of housing prices. For example, if the HPI, the Housing Price Index, is 130, that means that there was a 30% increase in the price of homes in that area since the base year, which in our example, the base year is the year 2000. The Federal Housing Finance Agency tracks the same house over time and specifically tracks the sales price change over time. If a house is sold in 2007 and then again in 2012, they'll track the price change. So that doesn't include any new single-family home development unless those homes sell. So in this graph, just a couple of points. Again, as Paul spoke about, toggle and really compare maybe Missoula with Montana and Gallatin. And the 2 points that I'll kind of highlight are Missoula and Gallatin County. So the Housing Price Index in 2021 for Gallatin County was a little over 318. Which means that since the year 2000, the home prices have increased over threefold. And the Housing Price Index in 2021 for Missoula was 264, which means our home prices increased since 2000 about 2.5 times. Just generally speaking, the Housing Price Index is one of many economic indicators that investors will use to keep a pulse on broader economic trends and potential shifts in the stock market.
Yeah, because I was holding it like that.
Test. There we go. Hey, good morning, everybody. Brent Walbert here, Chair of the Housing Report. I just wanted to say thank you, everyone, for taking the time out of your day to come here and take in everything we're talking about here today. I just appreciate each and every one of you with this discussion on facts and data and information with our market. Also, as you're building your questions, we're going to do Q&A at the end, so we'll have a floating microphone, and you just need to make sure you've got a microphone in hand for the questions so we can hear it online as well. Okay, so real estate numbers, real estate information. I'm going to be sharing kind of a blend of things. We're going to have some end-of-year numbers, but we also have some Q1 numbers because it's April, right? So we've got 3 more months of data that we're going to share as well. So what you see on screen right now is median sales price, and then also units sold in the market. Year-end median sales price in Missoula Metro was $450,000. End of first quarter, Median sales price in Missoula, $500,000. So in 3 months, up another $50,000. What you also notice there is the other thing that we also point out, and you've seen this as Dwight's been operating this with the presentation, is you can select and deselect and break apart types of properties. I thought it was pretty interesting if you look at the end of quarter 1, the median sales price for a detached house, what we call single family residential, was $529,000. A townhome was $434,000. A condo is $347,000. Just keep that in mind. So I'm going to share some interesting numbers on that breakdown in a little bit here. Sales volume at year end was 1,397 residential homes sold in our multiple listing service. That is a 16.3% decrease over where we were the year before. The year before was our highest point in our MLS measure that we've had in Missoula Metro. The 16.3% decrease reflects our lowest amount of homes sold reported in the MLS since 2015. Copy forward, right? Okay, so up next, we have our Housing Affordability Index. We talk a lot about indexes and metrics and things like this. So this is this index that we have used quite frequently when it comes to providing an index score to how we rate our affordability within the market. This is a measure that HUD uses quite frequently. And so what you can see here, probably no surprise to anyone, was that our Housing Affordability Index once again decreased. What's the reasons why? Well, we have, unfortunately, kind of a threefold factor. Median house prices at an all-time high, interest rates climbing, and then also reported median incomes in the Missoula area were down. Now, why were they down? Because our most recent income data that we retrieved has been influenced by COVID. And so you had layoffs and you had retirements. And that came from Derek with the university as we were talking to him, that you had a lot of factors that came into play. So rates up, prices up, incomes down. You see the sharp drop that this takes here. And it's probably no surprise that we see our affordability index kind of at its lowest point. I'll move forward to the table here, Dwight. So the table is the one where we hit you with the big grid of numbers with all the information here, where we take into account 2 measures of affordability. We provide an index score. So an index score, a housing affordability index score of 100, essentially means that the median priced home for the median price wage earner is basically deemed affordable. If you go over 100, it becomes more affordable. You are under essentially what is a 25% debt to income ratio on a monthly mortgage payment. So as you get further below 100, it becomes less affordable, more challenging. So what we've done here, as we've done for years and years, is you see that we have 2 scenarios. HUD always looks at a 20% down scenario, but what we put in years ago was also a 5% down scenario, because not everybody has a 20% down payment. But then we have to add in an extra factor with a 5% down payment, and that is that those individuals will be paying mortgage insurance as well. So what you can see here is that our housing affordability index score at year's end showed with 5% down, we went from 90 to the drop down to 57. And then with 20% down, we went from 112 down to 69. Again, you see the interest rate influence there. You see the income influence there as well too. And then what the difference in price does, which is the shift by $100,000. The numbers that are always kind of the real blunt ones that hit you with that are the incomes needed to basically hit that 25% debt to income on your monthly. So for a 5% down, that would be slightly over $123,500 per year. And for a 20% down, just a little over $102,000. We're going to be releasing pretty soon a first quarter look. And I think a lot of practitioners in the market, we know that interest rates are higher than 3.25. And we know the median prices are higher than 450. So when we release these, I'm going to just warn you that these numbers, the affordability index numbers, are going to drop even more. So be on the lookout for that when we release that. But these are the factors that are going on within the market and the continual challenges with affordability that we're seeing. Okay, relative affordability. So as we get this loaded, this is a new slide that we have in this report this year. What this is we've built a map of the entire kind of surrounding area, Missoula County and beyond. And we've, so the relative affordability would be the price point where you have that 100 affordability score. And so what that would be for your 2021, as you see right there, would be $337,900. So then, as it loads, what you see there is we basically assigned pinpoints from sales data. As you can see, kind of a good stretch over western Montana, where properties that have sold were either above that 337.9 threshold or below. So anything pink is above, anything in that kind of teal, little colorblind, so that teal, bluish, whatever you want to call it, it is below that affordability threshold. So what you see, of course, is especially in 2021, that only reflected, I believe, about 20% of our threshold. 10 years ago, it was 71% of our threshold. You'll notice there's interactive checkboxes on the side. You can go through those. You can see if you even go to like 2019. Right, once you click that for me real fast, if you see 2019, you can see just over the course of a couple years, the shift that has gone on. But see, look at that. You've got a lot more below affordability threshold, especially centered around town. And as you slide forward, those amount of properties really decrease out. But this is the first type of map as well, too, where we've expanded well beyond either Missoula Metro or Missoula County. So we thought it was pretty interesting to share that with you. Okay, up next, neighborhood maps. So for years and years and years, you've heard us talk about some neighborhoods that we as realtors kind of arbitrarily assigned based on old MLS data. We have completely revamped the mapping program, and this now reflects basically neighborhood councils and community councils as well, too. We had, let me see here, we had 12 maps. Now we have 27. So this is great in the sense that you can get a much better drilled down look at what is going on in specific neighborhood council overlays, and then kind of some of our surrounding community as well too. You see, we still have we have Bonner, we have Tura, we have Lolo, so we've got a lot of these other areas there as well too. This is a map that we introduced last year though with this mapping tool, so you can hover over these individual bubbles, and this is going to tell you sales volume that occurred on an annual basis. As you see with the checkboxes there, you can pick the year. And then it also is, we have other maps as well too. I'll show you a few more as we go forward, but as you can see when we hover over that, like there is the Subdivisions neighborhood that showed last year 184 residential sales with a median sales price of $439.9. So you can hover over all these interactive maps. And if you click on a bubble, it's going to zoom you right into that direct map overlay as well too. So a pretty cool interactive tool. And as you can see here, we also have updated first quarter of 2022. So you've got that as well too. All right, so more neighborhood data then, based upon these new neighborhoods that we put together. What we see is we have a table. Now, I doubt a lot of you can read this. All right, a lot of numbers. But when you're looking at the housing report on this shows you basically sales volume and median sales price by every single one of the 27 neighborhood breakup parts going all the way back to 2014. It's a lot of numbers. It's a lot of information. The darker pink the coding gets, the higher the median sales price it gets. What we saw was the highest increase in median sales price last year. The lower rattlesnake sales prices increased by 50.3%. River Road by 40.2%, and South 39th by 39.2%. As we were discussing this the other day, someone was like, well, it's interesting that River Road and South 39th areas, which were previously lumped in with a little bit lower median sales price, why are they going up so much? Well, in a market where affordability is an incredible challenge, people are trying to find homes at more affordable price points. Unfortunately, there's more people looking and there's less options. And so that's points where we're seeing the most amount of overbid activity, thus the highest amount of median sales price gains. The other thing I will caution you, especially when you're looking at some of these, is you're going to see some things where you've got just a handful of sales. So some median sales prices, especially with that 2022 data, where I can look at some of these and see like, what is it? I think it was like the Marshall Canyon or something was like close to, yeah, I mean, or some, you get some of these where you've got some real small sales points. We even got one though where, Marshall Canyon, there's been no sales. In the lower rattlesnake overlay has been reported so far, no sales. And so we don't have any data to report, but sometimes you see some big number swings with small data sets. So just exercise a little bit of caution when you look at 2022 and median sales price so far. So again, that affordability threshold of 337.9. At year's end, we only had 3 areas in that whole chart of 27, 3 neighborhoods in all of our 27 that had a median sales price below 337.9. That was East Missoula, the north side, and what we call the Old West Side. This year, so far, East Missoula, it has moved now, and there's only 2 left with a median sales price under $337,900, and that is Bonner and the West Side. If you look at that, of the 27 neighborhoods, there's only 5 with a median sales price under $400,000. Okay, sales by financing type. So we also have reported quite frequently the type of financing reported on purchase. What we saw last year was slightly over 96% of all sales were either conventional financing or purchased with cash. If you remember last year when we reported this, we noted we thought it was interesting that the amount of cash transactions, all cash, didn't really go up that much. Well, that changed. So in last year, what we saw was the year prior, all cash sales accounted for 17.75% of sales. It's gone up to 21.55%. So that's over 1/5. So 1 in every 5 homes that we see right now in our MLS are selling for cash in the Missoula Metro. At least they were last year. The other interesting thing that you see on the right-hand side, and this is where I told you to remember the condo and townhome numbers, is what we talk about the average percent of original list to final sales, to talk about how competitive this market is. So last year, the average list to final sale, regardless of price of home in Missoula, for a single-family residence was 103%. So basically, on average, things were selling for 3% over ask. Townhome was 101%, condo was 100%. So remember, condos and townhomes, a little bit lower median sales price. Well, so you look at Q1 for this year, townhomes are now selling for 106% over list price. Condos 104%. Again, the competitive nature and the lack of options is leading to very strong bidding up and over on condos and townhomes. Single family has remained at 103%. So when you see a list price on a property, on average, 3%, and as much as a townhome, 6% over ask. In our first quarter is where those were selling. All right, market supply. We've talked absorption rates a lot. I think most of this room has heard me talk quite a bit about absorption rates. It's a measure of supply and demand in our market. The number of active listings at a given point will be divided by sales in the last 30 days. And then we break it apart by price point. We have a total market look there. And as you can see, this one goes way back. We go all the way back. And the big spike that hits up the top was the 2008 real estate bubble as it hit Missoula's market. And you can see kind of that slow slide down. Our normal market range, what's considered a normal supply rate of market in your market, is between 3 months to 9 months, with 6 months kind of being your equilibrium point. So what happens then is when you get below that supply point, below 3 months of supply in your market, it becomes a seller's market. There's not enough inventory to meet the buyer demand. And the further down you get, the more upbidding you get. So with these numbers and this information, with the rapidly rising median sales prices, despite declining incomes, with this bidding up over ask at a higher point, this lack of supply is a major contributor to it, because those that want to buy are seeing less and less things to buy in this market. We have not had a steady amount of normal supply in our market now since Q1 of 2016. So it's been over 5 years. So that has been the long contributor to these rapid gains in median sales prices that we've seen. Current market supply at the year's end was 0.64 months of inventory. So basically 3 weeks of supply. Normal, right? 6 months. Or anything over 3 months is helpful. Right now, not much of a big change. We're at basically 0.74 months of supply. So a slight little uptick, but this is spring inventory time, right? Okay, supply gap. So what we started measuring last year was basically the hypothetical situation of, if we wanted to get back to normal market supply, depending on the price point, how much do we need? And so what we see, and the chart shows up on top here, we break it apart by $150,000 price points up to $750,000, then we go $750,000 plus. And this is based upon the activity that we've currently seen within the recent market. And this is a pretty real-time number. This is based on end of first quarter. The kind of a theoretical need where how much inventory would be needed to turn that market back to normal. So what you can see here is that a theoretical situation to return the market to normal supply puts us at a need at this point of 510 residential listings right now, which means based upon what we have in the MLS, Missoula's market is short by 447 houses. So you see that shortage, and the two biggest points where 350 to 450, 450 to 600, you combine those are almost 300 homes short of what this market could bear to return it to a normal amount of supply. Sales by price point, that's kind of on the bottom. You see we have the break apart where you see basically 0 to 150 has pretty much ceased to exist in this market. 150 to 300 is diminishing quite rapidly and becoming a very small segment of the market. We've even noticed that now that 350 to 400, the kind of darker pink, is starting to shrink as well too, as basically options in those price points are dwindling and dwindling as our median sales price and our values continue to climb. Okay, last one I've got here, and then we'll hand this off. Neighborhood supply. So we also take a look at absorption and supply by neighborhoods as well too. So you're going to see that same interactive neighborhood map that we have with supply and availability based that you see here. We've got the chart on the right-hand side, then the map that's going to load. You're going to see the same bubbles, and you can hover over those and click on those, and what it's going to show you is the amount of supply that's available in those neighborhoods. Probably is a shock to no one after I've told you all this wonderful supply news, is that we basically don't have any neighborhoods that have even a normal amount of supply. Per my count, I see we have essentially 2 that have 3 months of supply, and everything else, as you can see, is less than a month. And even in many situations, we have no supply, 0, no listings, nothing to buy in many neighborhoods. So again, this is another interactive map. You click the bubble, it's going to drag you right down to that exact neighborhood. You can see the boundaries for it as well too. You hover over it, it's going to give you the sales price and the supply count, basically the availability that you see in that specific neighborhood as time is put together. All right, that's what I got, and I'm going to hand this over to Paul.
Thank you, Paul Forston. I'm in corporate. I'm a senior land use planner at IMEC. I work with, I lead a team of 8 subdivision professionals here in Missoula, and I'm also the building industry president. So I have some interesting stuff to share with you. Dwight, can you go to the subdivision table? I'm going to start off by talking with you about residential subdivisions. Subdivisions are broken down into 2 distinct phases. There's the first phase, which is the preliminary plat phase. This is the phase where you would have neighborhood meetings. You would submit an application for review for the city or county. You would go in front of the planning board typically, and then you'll always end with a governing body hearing. Those are either the county commissioners or city council. So how many of those have we had over the years? Well, what you'll see on the screen there is 8 years of data that we've put together. These are all preliminary plat numbers. And we have it broken down by city and county, and then we have the 2 different charts actually show the number of projects that were approved, and then the number of units that were approved in those projects. So if we look at the top chart, that's the number of projects approved. And the interesting note there is over the last 8 years that we've been tracking it, the highest number that any jurisdiction, city or county, approved in a single year was 6 projects. That happened twice in the county over the last 8 years. Last year, the county approved 4 projects. In the city, they approved 1 project last year, and interestingly enough, the largest number of projects that have been approved in 1 year is 3. So over the last 8 years, there's been 3 subdivisions approved in the busiest year the city's had. This year, how many residential units were created? Well, in the city of Missoula, there was 1 residential subdivision approved, and that residential subdivision had 7 lots, but those aren't for single family. Those are all for multifamily lots. And so there's 0 single family lots created in the city of Missoula via the subdivision process last year. That's a dramatic decrease from 538, our banner year for subdivisions in 2020. And then if we look at our numbers, the highest thing we've had in the last 8 years, the second highest was 34. So if you're wondering where supply, what we have coming down the pipe, if you will, we have some houses that were approved last year that will be eventually approved and constructed, but not many. In the county, we had 4 subdivisions approved last year, and those created a total of 11 residential lots. So you're doing the math, there's 11 single-family residential lots created from subdivisions last year. You would expect that number to be much higher. You would expect that number to be closer to 530, just like we had the year before, and I would expect this year to be much better. But there is something going on there. We had very little subdivision activity last year, in a year where there's been an intense interest in creating new homes. The next slide I have here is goes with final plats. So some similar information here, but let's talk about final plats. The final platting is the second phase of the subdivision. You've gotten your project entitled, you've got it approved during the preliminary plat review process. And now during the final plat review process, you're going to actually create those lots for sales and for building. That's the very end of that process, is you actually get survey filed and lots are created. To get to that point, you have several things to do. You have to address your conditions of approval. You have to install all your infrastructure. You have to and get several agency approvals. And what we found on average, and this is data from the public, I guess, that it takes on average 6 years to file a final plat in the city of Missoula. So after that preliminary plat was entitled, say last year's project, that takes about 6 years on average, and in the county it's 7 years. And that's a skewed number in that there's a lot of old projects that are, we're talking Canyon River was approved in 1998. We still have several phases to file there. So that really skews the number, but it does tell part of the story. I think people want to file plats nowadays. People want to file them very quickly. They intend to. They build. They get a project approved with pre-plat, and they want to file it as soon as possible. It's very intense. That wasn't always the case over the last 20 years, in my experience. Some folks got it approved and then waited quite a bit for the market to be ready to pay for the infrastructure cost. So let's look at the numbers here. We don't have a table here, but we do have a chart showing you what went on. Did create 188 lots in the county via filing subdivisions plats, and we created 161 residential lots in the city. So I think that puts us somewhere in the 300, mid 300 number. But those will be available for development. Those will be available for single family homes. So we will see some inventory there. And that's good news. What the bad news is that we're not replenishing that inventory with new projects that meet today's standards and requirements of the city. These are older projects that have different standards, different requirements. And so the question is, can new projects, how do they fare in the new environment that we have for permitting? On to the next slide. This slide shows residential building permits. We have it broken down into type of permits in city and county. We also show townhouse exemptions, and I'll explain those. Maybe I'll start with townhouse exemptions. We've just been talking about subdivision. The alternative to subdivision is a townhouse exemption. A lot of you are probably familiar with those now. They were new back in I think 2011 is when they became an allowance through the state law. What we see is that we've had the lowest number of townhouse unit exemptions permitted since, well, our chart shows here, so I don't know how far back it goes, but in the last 8 years, we had the lowest amount of townhouse units permitted last year, with 27 total, 2 in the county. That there's reasons there's more in the city than the county. The county has the rules regarding those townhouses don't really work well in the county, as opposed to they work almost anywhere in the city. So there was a severe drop-off in units created from townhouses. Our high point was 2015, where we had 165 were approved. 2019, we had 111 approved, and then this year we had 27. So we've seen a downward decline in those units. You basically can put a point when the city changed new rules. They adopted new rules in 2019 that were more difficult, and so we've seen a downward trend since then. Now let's talk about residential building permits. What we, like I said, we break them up single family. Most importantly, single family and multi. Right, those are the two numbers. Duplex, we track those, but there's very small numbers of duplexes. What we see is the total. In the city, we have a total of 1,330 new units approved, and that is combined of 1,112 multifamily units and 206 single-family units. That's the lowest number of single-family units built in the city of Missoula since 2015. In the county, we had 232 units total, and most of those were single-family at 218. So in the county, we've seen a nice slight increase of single-family houses, and in the city, we've seen a decrease in those. And then, of course, what's happening in the city? Well, we're building multifamily. That's where the growth is. That's what is. Why is that the case? Well, traditionally, multifamily has been the easiest thing to get built in the city. where single-family development is very difficult to get through. That's basically all the numbers I had for you.
Thank you again to the presenters and all who contributed to the housing report. Also, thank you to the Missoula Public Library staff, both for helping us set up this space and also the use of this beautiful public space. We realize the numbers are grim and we are not happy about the direction that they are heading. As you saw from the data, there are not enough housing units for sale or rent. We are out of balance and in a crisis. Developers, realtors, builders, city and county are all at the table. There are plans in place to create thousands of units, but the timeline is not adequate, and we need a way to pick up the pace, reduce regulations, and encourage collaboration from all parties so we can protect the ability for the workforce to live here. Thank you for your time, and we will be opening up the floor to questions. A quick reminder, MCAT is recording, and we ask that all questions be spoken into available microphones. Cindy and Shannon will assist you. And Jim, you moderate, please.
You just raise your hand in the room. We got a couple in the back there, Cindy. As you're walking back there, Cindy, I'm going to take one from online. Mr. Wahlberg, this goes to you.
All right.
In the new rollout of the neighborhoods, there's a question around the West Side neighborhood, and it includes 44 Ranch, Pleasant View, Elmar Ranch Club, Canyon Creek, Windsor Park. So that's a lot of little sub-neighborhoods. Is that too big, and should that be broken out more detail?
Now, if you could pull that up, I don't believe the West Side neighborhood actually consists of 44 Pleasant, Elmar. I think those are separate individual neighborhoods. And so my understanding of what the West Side neighborhood is this little kind of triangle where you are Broadway to, what is it, about Reserve Street or Scott Street? Scott Street. So Broadway, Scott Street, train tracks, that little triangular piece, that's the West Side, as the neighborhood council defines it. You see that? We've got that there on the bubbles. I think there it is. Click on that, Dwight. That should zoom down in, I believe. So it'll kind of give you a little range of those boundaries. Maybe not, but that it's a smaller one. You're good, Aaron. I see your no need to pause. Appreciate the clarification.
Thank you. Back to Cindy in the back there. Mike's not on, Cindy.
It's like a 2-second pause.
There you go.
Turn it on.
Yes. Hello, my name is Brady Potts. My question is two-part. It's for Mr. Forstein. In your slide about the subdivisions that have been approved, are those considering boundary line relocations?
No. Boundary relocation is where you see this new house come up. It's often a relocation of a boundary to create a new parcel for development. Sometimes a house sits on two properties, but it can be moved and they can make space for another home. So over the years, when we look at the building permit numbers and we look at the subdivision numbers, there's a gap in there, and those are often because of those BLRs, those exemptions that we've done. And then to add to what you said about the timing of it, I do think it's important that the city, and all I know is the city can prioritize anything that doesn't have a regulatory timeline. They prioritize building permits. We've seen that with the multifamily building permits. And subdivisions truly have a deadline, and so once you get to a certain stage, you can expect a certain time frame when you review it. But things like boundary line relocations, rezoning, townhouse unit exemptions, none of those have any timeline built in. So those have all been put on the very back burner. The city will typically will tell you that they've taken those and said we don't have staff to work on those. We're not prioritizing. Well, that's where all of our inventory comes from. Not all. I mean, it certainly comes from these new subdivisions. So that's where a lot of our inventory has traditionally come from. Yeah.
And I'm hearing another part of that question that I think is a takeaway for us as an organization is one of the things you're asking is there something that can be done from a city county regulatory perspective to speed up when there is boundary line readjustments needed? I think that's a takeaway that we can look at. Right? There is conversations in the community, which we're working on. Thank you. Cindy, I think you had one more. Did you have any over here, Shannon? No. Good. Any other questions in the room or?
Hold on. Gotta give this a minute. Come on.
Here, I got it. Gene? I'm holding it too. Remember to give it back.
My question is for Brent. So you're saying that we're basically 450 units shy of meeting our goals. What is your projection by the end of the year? What that will be?
Oh boy. Well, that's an interesting question. Obviously, I will disclose the room. I don't have a crystal ball, so it's hard for me to, accurately predict. But I would say, as we've been tracking this, we have kind of continually been at this 400 plus homes short. Activity goes. Our activity is continuing to decrease, but we're also seeing, of course, market factors of raising median prices, pricing more people out of the market, raising interest rates, affordability challenges. In terms of if our market continues to slow its pace, the gap could shorten a little bit by nature of just individuals not looking to purchase anymore. But I would think it would still stay probably in that 400 plus range throughout the year, most likely. We usually tend to see jumps in inventory in the spring and summer, but we've not really seen that occur that much in the last few years. So I think it's going to probably hold pretty steady, maybe decrease a little bit, but not a lot more.
We've got another question in the back. Have a microphone that works this time. All right, go ahead and let us know your name first.
My name is Warren Altunian, and I'm a realtor. And I was curious about, clearly there's a large physical turnout here and probably a very large online turnout because we all recognize, that these are very serious issues that need to be addressed. And so my question really, first of all, thank you, panel, for providing the data. But what can we do as individuals, as a collective, to maybe assist the city in expediting some of these projects? Mr. Forsing's numbers are terrifying, that 6 years for a subdivision approval, that's a major metropolitan, entitlement process for a city you're trying to develop a high-rise line. So it's very concerning to me that we have this massive gap in supply. We have a huge demand, and it seems like our focus needs to be on these larger projects. And I think it behooves the city to focus in these directions about, 11 houses, 6 houses a year. That's not remotely close to what our market demands at this point. So I'm just curious what we can do individually and as a group.
Who wants to take that question?
I'm going to take a first shot at that. One of the things that WAR has been doing in partnership with Missoula Economic Partnership is bringing people from all parts of that life cycle, the build life cycle, together, including the city and the county. And I think one of the things that we had conversations on recently is just that of prioritization. Who should get front in the queue? That just came up last week. I think there's going to be some continued dialogue on that. There's no easy answer to that. Should I pick you over you over you? That's really hard to determine. Is the single project more important than a complex that's going to put 2,500 units online? That is a debate. I think what we're doing is coming together as a community and having that dialogue and trying to figure out all pain points in the life cycle. How do we accelerate? There's not going to be one silver bullet to this crisis. It's going to take a bunch of little bit of things in our toolbox, putting that together, and hopefully we work through it. Shannon, I put you on the spot. You've been involved in that. What else would you add to it?
Build more houses. I do have 2 questions on this side of the room.
I've got one online too.
Can I add to that really quickly?
Yeah, of course.
I also think, we're headed, in the beginning of 2023, we are headed into a legislative session, and there are certainly statewide regulations that impact our ability to grow and build. And so I think it would behoove folks, if they want to take individual action, to keep an eye on housing-related legislation. MOR does a fantastic job of informing folks about that, but I would also highly suggest that you take a look at the Montana Housing Coalition, which is a coalition that is specifically focused on pushing forward legislation that's regarding home building and affordability throughout the state.
One other thing to add real quick, the Missoula Organization of Realtors does have a attainability committee that invites people to come and brainstorm, come throw out an idea, and we'll try and give you some feedback and say, how's that gonna go? Get creative. Talk to Jim Deshawn if you want to come to that with any ideas.
I got a couple online, real quick ones.
Go ahead.
Mr. Wahlberg, this seems like an annual question that we're getting, so at some point we'll have a solution here. Has there been any movement on the developing a way to track by zip code where buyers are coming from, or getting a breakdown of in-state buyer versus out-of-state buyers?
Excellent question, David. Appreciate it. And unfortunately, we still don't have a good solution for it. So it has been a talking point of how many of our residential sales are in-town buyers or out-of-state buyers, or where are these buyers coming from? What we rely upon for most of our data is IRS data that comes out when an individual files their taxes. So if you filed your taxes in Texas last year and Missoula this year, then the IRS says, oh, we have one from Texas coming to Montana. What we don't know is if they rent, if they bought a house, or what. Our best tool to track this is our multiple listing service, but it's a big hurdle because multiple listing service would require a little bit more knowledge that is not normally shared in a real estate transaction. So this is something we've tried to find a solution to, and unfortunately, I don't think we've got one on our horizon.
Shannon,
Right.
I'll go over to you.
Question
You
over
had
here.
one behind you. Oh.
Please state your name too.
Pat Lawler, developer. One of the things that we can do is look at the construct that we've always been working with as to how to create housing. And one of the ways that we're working on is to look at how condominiums can be actually a part of the solution for entry-level affordable housing.
Anyone want to respond to that? I got a question over here. Thank you, Pat. Can I have her ask her question?
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
Hi.
Your name, please.
My name is Laura Bird. I like all this talk about affordability, and I like that we're raising these issues. And but what I want to say that goes hand in hand with affordability in this community is also accessibility, and that's also not happening. There is a large population in this town who do not meet these income levels at all, and so we're pushing out a lot of those individuals because of accessibility. When we continue to develop on these outlying areas, how are these people going to get to work? I mean, you also, I just want to create more awareness to that factor as well. I feel like a lot of the people in this room are very, may not be as aware of that problem as maybe me and, the clients I work with. But I have clients that are homeless today that need help today, not 6 months from now, not a year from now, not 6 years from now. But I also just want to keep in mind that dark future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the point of view. Really appreciate it. Thank you. We have a question here, Shannon, and then online.
Right. Tell us your name.
How does ensuring adequate supply of housing with the 750,000 plus price point help support other segments of the housing market?
Great question. So, I mean, it seems kind of odd to be talking about 750 plus at supply there helping the market. But if you look at it, if there is more availability at that price point, that would encourage people at other price points to move up into it. So a homeowner in this market has gained a tremendous amount of wealth in their home value. And so if an individual has more opportunities over 750 to purchase, they might sell their home, be it for 400 or 500 or 600, and thus it will kind of help with that market churn. With more inventory available, presumably at lower price points, where they can sell, roll their equity up into a higher price home, and allow more people to get into home ownership.
Okay, question on the floor, and then I've got another one right here. You're next. You're first.
Okay, Gina Haig, Montana Dream Properties. Couple questions. How are auxiliary dwelling units fitting into this conversation today? And how come we don't have a planning board representative on this panel? Or do we? Do we have a planning board member?
Do we have a planning board member? We don't. Yeah. Any news? I don't follow you. ADUs?
How do ADUs fit into this conversation?
Yeah, what I've heard about ADUs through the building industry is that the current allowance in the city is just too small to make a pencil. I think they're like 6 square feet or something like that. And I'm not a builder, but it's my understanding to build that small of a building with all the infrastructure that you need in a small house like that is too expensive to make a pencil. That's why I think city board not do the larger one.
I'm Heidi West. I'm on the city council. I was wondering if you could dig down into the condominium numbers a little bit more. My very rudimentary understanding of construction financing is that 51% of those units have to be pre-sold. And so I was wondering if there's any distinction in the MLS data between pre-sold units versus condominiums that are homes right now.
Sure. So everything is reported as sold in our data, so that there's no pre-sold data in there. And the 51 units, my understanding, is 51%. Apologies, is that is on new build projects. So what the numbers we report represent units that have been built previously and are now owned or purchased by someone else. So it's nothing that's you look across the river and it's being built with pre-sold units. Those are not included in our count. Are not.
There's another question over here somewhere.
Shannon, two more questions.
2 more questions. All right. Be sure to tell us your name.
Karen Berg-DeGangi of ERA Lambros. I suppose less of a question and more of a comment. But I'd be curious of all the different business and business owners that are in this room, where your lowest paid employee would fall upon the affordability of renting or buying in the city, and how might income and wages be one of the biggest factors of these gaps, and how we as a business, as realtors, can address that from our own company's standpoint.
Anyone want to take that? Comment on that? Okay, thank you for the comment and the thoughts. One more question. You over there? Okay, I've got Brady again.
Thank you, Carissa, for pointing out some of the individual things that we could do and get involved with and organizations we can reach. Somebody had just asked if there was a planning board representative on this committee. Are there committees that are needing certain industry professions to bring that knowledge base to them? So I know Moore has various subcommittees. I know some of the data points you guys have talked about, like out-of-state people could be filled by certain industry experts. Where do you guys see a need for bodies in these advocacy committees?
Great question. Consolidated planning board. I mean, they're always looking for resources. I think it's important from an objectivity perspective that we don't have somebody from the consolidated planning board on our data committee. I think that role, it's important that it's independent of a committee like this. So that's one, consolidated planning board. One off the top of my head. Other people, Andy, suggestions? Come to our attainability. Reach out to me and join our attainability meeting. We meet on almost a quarterly basis, and it's a think tank for how do we do accessibility, attainability at all price points. Thank you.
And all that too, when it comes to this committee with data and reports and information, we are always open to suggestions from individuals and those who want to bring forward additional points of discussion. I think if you go back and look at the very first housing report, it comes 2-page print that just had a little bit of numbers. So now we are a full web presentation with all sorts of different points of housing across the full spectrum. So if there are suggestions that individuals do want to help, especially on our data collection and presentation side, those are always open. You can talk to Dr. Jim, you can talk to myself, you can talk to our president a little bit. This report is on MR's website. In fact, what you've been seeing on the stream is direct off of the website, MissoulaRealEstate.com, and then we've got the button on the right side that will get you to it. And we also have the QR code up there. Scan it.
Thank you all for coming today and giving us your time and your attention. Like Brent said, you can access this through our MRR website, and also you can see the historical housing reports and how they've changed over time and older data. Thank you again for coming, and we look forward for you getting involved, and let's see what we can do about this. Thank you.